Of all the great cradles of civilization, none has captured the human imagination like ancient Egypt. This was a realm where mortal kings became gods, where humanity's earliest stone monuments pierced the heavens, and where the mysteries of death were transformed into an elaborate science. For 3,000 years, this civilization dominated the Nile Valley, creating wonders that still leave us breathless millennia later. What forces created such an enduring empire, and what ultimately caused this magnificent civilization to fade into history? Our journey through time begins at the very dawn of human settlement along the life-giving Nile. Africa stands as the birthplace of human intelligence on Earth. Over millions of years of climate shifts, the early hominids of this continent gradually evolved into modern humans who would eventually spread across the globe. The earliest Egyptians emerged 19,000 years ago as nomadic peoples in the Quarta region of Upper Egypt, the Nile Valley south of Cairo, while Lower Egypt encompassed the fertile delta north of the capital. During this distant era, Africa's landscape was far different from today's arid expanse. Lush vegetation supported abundant wildlife, and early humans left their artistic mark on stone walls, vivid cave paintings depicting wild cattle that would become the ancestors of today's domestic breeds. These nomadic peoples enjoyed a surprisingly rich diet, with beef as their primary sustenance. As Earth's climate continued its relentless change, Africa began its transformation into the arid continent we know today. The nomadic tribes started settling around permanent lakes and reliable water sources. Nabta Playa, constructed around 7000 BCE in the heart of Egypt's Sahara Desert, represents one of humanity's earliest permanent settlements. Here, people raised cattle, crafted fine pottery, and erected massive stone circles for ceremonial purposes, a testament to their increasingly complex social organization. These ancient peoples began establishing connections between earthly life and celestial forces, and during this same period, the first seeds of religious belief took root in ancient Egypt. The emerging religious consciousness saw animals associated with divine beings. A remarkable stone sculpture resembling a cow dates from this era. What scholars believe represents the earliest origins of Hathor, the Egyptian goddess, later depicted as a cow, a woman with a cow's head, or a woman with cow's ears. She governed love, beauty, dance, and music, aspects of human experience that would remain central to Egyptian culture for millennia. As Africa grew increasingly arid and lakes began to dry up, people gravitated toward the only reliable water source, Egypt's mother river, the Nile. Here, along its life-giving banks, ancient Egyptian civilization truly began to flourish. They established homes and villages along the riverbanks, engaging in agriculture and animal husbandry that would become the economic foundation of their civilization. Lower Egyptian populations concentrated around the Delta and Fayum regions, while Upper Egyptians primarily settled around Cannae. The ancient Egyptians, like today's inhabitants of Egypt, North Africa, and the Arab world, were predominantly Caucasoid, with some Negroid features, a highly diverse population where different individuals and regions showed varying degrees of these characteristics. Moving south toward what is now northern Sudan and Nubia, Caucasoid features became less pronounced, while Negroid traits became more prominent, a genetic gradient that reflected the complex migration patterns of early humans. Despite its ancient heritage, Egypt lacked historical chronicles for millennia. It wasn't until around 350 BCE that Ptolemy I, Egypt's governor, following Alexander the Great's death, commissioned the priest-scholar Manetho to compile Egypt's first comprehensive history. This invaluable historical record met a tragic fate in 47 BCE when Julius Caesar's conquest of Egypt resulted in the burning of the Great Library of Alexandria, destroying this complete Egyptian history along with hundreds of thousands of other ancient texts. Only fragments survived, preserved by church historians, and these remain crucial sources for studying ancient Egyptian history today. Precious fragments of a lost masterpiece. Manetho divided Egyptian history into 30 dynasties spanning 3 major periods: the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. Modern scholars have refined this system, identifying 33 dynasties across 5 distinct eras: the pre-dynastic period, early dynastic period, imperial period, Hellenistic period, and Roman rule, a chronological framework that helps us understand the incredible span of this civilization. Around 7,500 years ago, approximately 5000 BCE, ancient Egypt entered the pre-dynastic period. During this era, Egyptians pioneered the creation of beer and bread, staple foods that would sustain their civilization for millennia. They would fill pottery vessels with beer and gather to drink heartily. Their diet was remarkably diverse and abundant for the time. The pre-dynastic period divides into 2 phases: the Amratian city-state period and the Gurzian city-state period. Since no dynasties existed yet, this era is also called the pre-dynastic period, a time of cultural and technological development that would set the stage for pharaonic rule. Around 4000 BCE, Egyptians began establishing city-states throughout their lands, including what would become great cities like Thebes and Memphis. As productivity advanced, society began producing modest surpluses. Private property and class distinctions emerged during this period, the first social stratification that would characterize Egyptian civilization. Archaeologists discovered evidence of warfare at Naqada, one of civilization's defining characteristics, indicating that by the period's end, organized conflict was beginning to take shape. During the later Gurzian period, as private property became established and social classes formed, the first states appeared in Egypt. Egyptians called these early states Sepat. Multiple such states existed simultaneously across Egypt, each centered around governmental buildings, palaces, and temples, the architectural expressions of power that would become increasingly magnificent over time. Around 3250 BCE, the earliest Egyptian writing system emerged. These states likely already had taxation systems, and the hieroglyphic-like symbols served to calculate taxes, a practical beginning for what would become one of history's most beautiful writing systems. These symbols gradually evolved into the Egyptian hieroglyphic writing we recognize today, a complex system that would record the triumphs, beliefs, and daily life of this remarkable civilization. Ancient Egyptian writing had no fixed direction. It could be written top to bottom or right to left, whatever seemed most convenient to the scribe. Each line began with a human or animal head, and the direction these figures faced indicated the reading direction, an elegant solution to a practical problem. The Gurzian period was marked by constant warfare between competing city-states. Numerous sculptures and paintings from this era depict battles, including water and land combat scenes, found on the Abydos ivory knife handle and the battlefield palette, artistic evidence of the turbulent times that preceded unification. The 1987 discovery of the Scorpion King's mace head revealed that organized warfare had indeed emerged on a significant scale. The mace, traditionally a symbol of royal power, represents the earliest such artifact found in Egypt. It depicts a man wearing Upper Egypt's white crown, along with royal symbols and a scorpion, hence the name Scorpion King. Based on the mace head's contents and recent discoveries from his tomb, scholars theorize that the Scorpion King controlled territories in the north, providing the earliest evidence of Egyptian unification efforts, the beginning of the long process that would create the world's first nation-state. Around 3100 BCE, to control Lower Egypt's fertile delta agriculture and labor force, as well as the profitable trade routes to the Levant, the Scorpion King's successor, Narmer, personally led his armies northward. After 3 days and nights of battle, he defeated the rulers of Lower Egypt in a decisive confrontation. Narmer named the battle site White Walls, which later became the capital of unified ancient Egypt. Known as Memphis, a city that would serve as Egypt's administrative center for centuries, Narmer's conquest of Lower Egypt marked the initial unification of Egypt into a single state. The famous Narmer palette, discovered at Hierakonpolis, commemorates this victory, a conquest of Lower Egypt by Upper Egypt that created a kingdom that would endure for millennia. The palette's front and back show the same figure, wearing both the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt. Clearly, this is Narmer, the first king to wear the double crown, symbolizing his role as King of Kings over both Upper and Lower Egypt, a powerful visual representation of unity. Some archaeologists believe the Scorpion King and Narmer were the same person, as the figures on the Scorpion King's mace head and Narmer's palette bear striking similarities, a historical mystery that may never be fully resolved. Narmer established ancient Egypt's first dynasty, beginning the age of pharaonic rule. Among the 100 most influential rulers in world history, nearly all have well-documented biographies. Only Narmer remains an exception. Yet this doesn't diminish the profound respect history accords this foundational figure. Ancient Egypt stands among the world's oldest civilizations, and Narmer was the extraordinary man who stood at its very beginning. He founded one of history's most enduring and influential kingdoms. For over 300 subsequent pharaohs, claiming connection to Narmer became essential for establishing legitimacy, a tradition that would continue for 3 millennia. Narmer ruled for 62 remarkable years, when the average Egyptian lifespan was merely 30 years. And anyone over 30 was considered elderly. Narmer seemed almost godlike to his people. Tragically, this near-divine figure met his end during a hunting expedition when a hippopotamus attacked him, a sudden death that must have shocked his subjects. The first dynasty that Narmer founded lasted 250 years. Under the 5th king, Egypt entered a period of absolute monarchy, reaching the height of social development during this era. Kings claimed ownership over all land, viewing their subjects as personal servants. They concentrated administrative, military, and judicial powers in their own hands, creating a system of government that would characterize ancient Egypt throughout its history. The king declared himself the son of the sun god, becoming an object of sacred and inviolable worship. Later, Egyptian kings came to be called pharaoh, originally meaning great house or palace, similar to how ancient Chinese referred to their emperor as Your Majesty, a linguistic evolution that reflected their exalted status. Ancient Egyptians were possibly among the world's first people to practice tattooing. The earliest known mummy, nicknamed Ginger for his reddish hair, bears tattoos on his skin. Though mummification techniques were still primitive, Africa's dry climate preserved this body remarkably well. Ginger lived between 3,300 to 3000 BCE and died young, around 18 to 21 years old, only shadows melting into darkness after suffering violent injuries. A poignant reminder of the harshness of ancient life. Ancient Egyptians practiced tattooing across genders. Though patterns differed, men typically chose animal motifs, while women preferred geometric designs. Tattoos likely symbolized tribal authority and status, early examples of how the human body became a canvas for cultural expression. When discussing ancient Egypt, we cannot ignore their profound funerary culture. Ancient Egyptians were among the world's peoples most concerned with the afterlife. Pharaohs and nobility elevated death culture to unprecedented heights, believing death was not life's end, but the key to opening the next world, a belief that would inspire their most enduring achievements. First dynasty burial practices, while less elaborate than later periods, included a terrifying ritual: human sacrifice. Archaeologists discovered hundreds of young skeletons in the tomb of the First Dynasty's second pharaoh, Hor-Aha. Analysis showed most victims were between 20 and 25 years old, a grim practice that accompanied early rulers to the afterlife. These sacrificial victims were primarily servants, though some may have volunteered. Regardless, this represented an extremely barbaric practice that fortunately existed only briefly during the early First Dynasty and never returned. After all, the living needed servants too. Later, Egyptians replaced human sacrifice with figurines called shabtis, meaning answerers or servants. These were typically painted blue, a color Egyptians deeply loved. Blue represented the sky and the Nile River, symbolizing the universe and life force, a sacred color that connected the earthly and divine realms. They inscribed text on these figurines, declaring, "I am here to work for my master." Ancient Egyptians believed these blue figurines would come to life in the afterlife, continuing to serve their pharaoh and guard his eternal world. A more humane solution that reflected evolving ethical sensibilities. After the First Dynasty ended, Egypt entered the Second Dynasty of the early dynastic period, ruling from 2890 to 2686 BCE, lasting 205 years under 6 pharaohs. This period marked ancient Egypt's entry into the Bronze Age, signaling their advancement into bronze tool technology, a metallurgical revolution that enhanced both military and agricultural capabilities. They established governmental institutions and adopted hereditary succession, completing the development of monarchical autocracy, a political system that would prove remarkably stable. Like the mysterious end of the First Dynasty, the Second Dynasty's beginning remains an unsolved puzzle. Archaeological discoveries from the Second Dynasty are even scarcer than the first, making this period's history extremely difficult to interpret. A shadowy interval between more documented eras. By the time of the Third Dynasty, ancient Egyptian civilization had reached mature form, presenting itself confidently to the world. This makes the Second Dynasty's history even more enigmatic, a missing chapter in Egypt's early development. From 2686 to 2613 BCE, ancient Egypt entered the Third Dynasty of the Old Kingdom period. Compared to previous dynasties, this period was relatively brief, only 73 years, under 5 pharaohs. Yet it witnessed architectural innovations that would define Egyptian civilization for centuries. The most famous was the second pharaoh, Djoser, ruling approximately 2780 to 2760 BCE. He possessed remarkable strategic vision. As the buffer zone between the Nile Valley and Asia, the Sinai Peninsula held immense strategic value that Djoser recognized and acted upon. During his reign, Djoser launched multiple expeditions against the Sinai Peninsula, conquering local indigenous peoples. He sent personnel to mine turquoise and copper in the region, valuable resources that would enhance Egypt's wealth and technological capabilities. Additionally, he conquered parts of Nubia, building fortifications south of the Nile's first cataract. Truly impressive military achievements that expanded Egypt's influence and secured its borders. His historical records indicate that during Djoser's reign, the Nile failed to flood for 7 consecutive years, leading to agricultural failure and famine, a catastrophic event that tested the young state's resilience. An inscription on Sehel Island near the first cataract reads, "I tell my people with great sorrow that Egypt has fallen into extreme suffering. The Nile has not flooded for 7 years. Our granaries are empty. People lack sufficient food to fill their bellies. The treasury is depleted. People are tormented by hunger, gasping for breath, unable to see tomorrow." For Egypt, the gift of the Nile, annual flooding brought fertile silt that made the river valley extraordinarily productive, capable of 3 harvests per year. This formed the foundation of ancient Egyptian civilization's development, a hydrological miracle that made prosperity possible in an otherwise arid landscape. Multiple famines occurred throughout Egyptian history, mostly related to the Nile's unpredictable behavior. This 7-year drought represented an extremely severe crisis that threatened the survival of the state itself. Djoser's vizier, Imhotep, served as the pharaoh's chief minister, helping govern the nation and manage affairs, equivalent to a prime minister in modern terms. Imhotep was an extraordinary individual of common birth who, through his intelligence and talent, broke class barriers, a testament to the social mobility still possible in early Egyptian society. Imhotep held multiple titles: priest, writer, physician, Egyptian astronomer, and founder of architecture, a Renaissance man millennia before the Renaissance. He designed priestly rituals and established the practice of removing internal organs before mummification, innovations that would become standard practice for centuries. In treating various diseases, he combined medicine with ritual practices, reciting incantations, performing special therapeutic gestures, and using amulets and other tools to enhance healing power. While this might seem primitive today, such treatment provided crucial psychological therapy for Egyptians who believed illness came from demons, increasing patients' confidence and will to overcome disease. A holistic approach that addressed both body and spirit. Later, generations deified him as Imhotep, the god of wisdom. His historical reputation even surpassed Djoser's, a rare instance where a servant became more famous than his master. Imhotep's most famous achievement was helping Djoser build Egypt's first pyramid, the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, serving as Djoser's tomb. This pyramid consisted of 6 mastaba structures of different sizes stacked upon each other. Mastaba, from Arabic, meaning stone bench, originally described ancient Egyptian architectural style and served as the tomb form for nobles before the Old Kingdom, a design that would evolve into the iconic pyramid form. Imhotep initially designed a conservative square tomb, half underground, half above ground. When Djoser found it insufficiently magnificent, Imhotep added 5 progressively smaller square structures on top, creating today's appearance, an architectural innovation born of royal ambition. As we can see, every great work benefits from an excellent patron's vision. The Step Pyramid became the world's tallest building at 62 meters high, equivalent to a 19-story building. Its base measured 109 by 125 meters, covering approximately 13,000 square meters, roughly the size of 2 soccer fields. Unlike its current appearance, the pyramid was originally covered with white polished limestone that gleamed in the desert sun, a dazzling sight that proclaimed the pharaoh's power. It may also have been Egypt's first tourist attraction. Graffiti from visitors thousands of years ago remains preserved inside. Humanity's urge to leave marks has existed since ancient times, a timeless expression of, "I was here." The Step Pyramid established several important precedents. As the first stone monumental building, such a massive and carefully crafted stone structure created tremendous social impact. This stone construction process required far more intensive labor than previous buildings, indicating Egypt had reached new levels in controlling both human and material resources, an administrative achievement as impressive as the architectural one. The pyramid served purposes for both afterlife and present world. Egyptian pyramids weren't merely tombs. They functioned to help pharaohs reach the afterlife and achieve eternal rebirth. People believed that within these tombs, the deceased pharaoh's soul would rise upward, reaching the sun and stars in heaven. The pyramid's shape would facilitate the pharaoh's ascension to join the eternal North Star, a celestial symbolism that connected earthly monuments with cosmic order. With political and civilizational unity at its peak, Egypt had become the world's most powerful nation. The pharaoh, wielding supreme authority, could obtain anything he desired, except perhaps escape from mortality itself. From 2613 to 2494, before the Common Era, Egypt entered the 4th dynasty, known as Ancient Egypt's Golden Age and the Pyramid Age. Egypt's population reached 10 million, a remarkable density for the ancient world, providing the foundation for building even more magnificent pyramids. Starting with the 4th dynasty, pyramids began taking the smooth, angular pyramid shape we recognize today. The pharaoh who completed this transformation was the dynasty's first ruler, Sneferu, an innovative builder who constructed 3 major pyramids as he refined the architectural form. His son, the second pharaoh Khufu, built the largest of the 110 pyramids discovered so far, the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza. This monumental structure was designed by Pharaoh's brother, Hemiunu, and built on the Nile's west bank near the capital Memphis, a location chosen because Egyptians believed the sun rose in the east, land of the living, and set in the west, realm of the dead, making the West Bank the appropriate place for eternal rest. It remains the only surviving wonder of the ancient world. As an Egyptian proverb states, "Man fears time, but time fears the pyramids," a poetic acknowledgement of these structures' incredible endurance. The other six wonders were the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the Temple of Artemis, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the Colossus of Rhodes, and the Lighthouse of Alexandria, all now lost to time, making the Great Pyramid uniquely precious. The Great Pyramid consists of 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing approximately 2.5 tons on average. Building it required 30 years and employed over 100,000 people annually. A massive undertaking that required sophisticated organization and logistics. Originally, the pyramid had a brilliant white appearance from its limestone casing stones and stood 146.6 meters tall, equivalent to a 40-story skyscraper. It held the record as the world's tallest building for 3,800 years until Lincoln Cathedral was built around 1300 CE, an incredible architectural dominance. Due to weathering and stone theft over millennia, the pyramid currently stands 138.8 meters tall, with a base length of 231 meters, covering approximately 53,000 square meters, equivalent to 7.5 football fields. Still an awe-inspiring size, despite its reduced dimensions. Archaeologists discovered papyrus records near the Great Pyramid, documenting the construction process. Pyramid planning began in Khufu's first regnal year. Each summer, Egyptian officials visited villages throughout the realm, selecting strong men in the pharaoh's name to serve in various locations along the Nile Valley, including pyramid construction. Importantly, none of these workers were slaves. They were free farmers. Many of their fathers or grandfathers had been similarly conscripted to build pyramids in their youth. Some died at construction sites, but most eventually returned home. A system of rotated national service rather than slavery. To build this pyramid, workers established an entire city nearby for housing. This city bustled with life. Workshops, bakeries, tool manufacturing, food processing areas, and hospitals. Archaeological evidence shows workers consumed approximately 74 cattle and 257 sheep weekly, plus unlimited beer supplies, a diet that suggests they were valued laborers rather than abused slaves. Working conditions were quite favorable by ancient standards, with medical care evidenced by healed fractures found in workers' skeletons. Building the Great Pyramid required over 5 million tons of stone blocks from two sources: Tura, 24 kilometers from the pyramid, and distant Aswan, 800 kilometers away. They transported these stones via the Nile River using sophisticated shipping techniques, a logistical achievement matching the architectural one. Satellite imagery research suggests the Nile's ancient course ran much closer to the current pyramid complex, making water transport more feasible than previously thought. The workforce was enormous and strictly disciplined. Workers became familiar with procedures, developing into skilled masons for tomb construction. A specialized workforce that passed knowledge through generations. Each worker had clearly defined roles: quarrymen, stone transporters, and craftsmen. Each quarryman worked with copper tools, with copper sourced from the Sinai Peninsula, hundreds of kilometers away, since the Nile Valley lacked copper deposits. A mining operation that itself required significant organization. One group of craftsmen marked each stone block with different symbols, ensuring proper placement in the pyramid, an early quality control system. Water proved crucial to pyramid construction. Egypt possessed a unique red clay called tafla. When moistened, anything could slide across it. On-site stone transporters worked with water carriers, who constantly sprinkled water from jars before the sleds carrying stones, reducing friction dramatically. Stone transporters placed quarried blocks on sled-like bases. Then water carriers began their work, sprinkling water in front of the sleds, while transporters focused on pulling. Their coordination was remarkably organized, a well-choreographed operation that moved massive weights with surprising efficiency. These workers believed their contribution to the great pharaoh's work would endure through the pyramid's existence for thousands of years, thus blessing their own afterlives, a spiritual motivation that complemented their material compensation. The Great Pyramid currently contains 3 known chambers: the King's Chamber, Queen's Chamber, and Underground Chamber, though their exact purposes remain debated. The King's Chamber houses a massive granite sarcophagus, believed to be where Khufu's mummy rested. However, the sarcophagus was found completely empty, a mystery that continues to puzzle Egyptologists. Below the King's Chamber lies a smaller chamber called the Queen's Chamber, though archaeologists believe it wasn't designed for a queen, but had some other ritual purpose. Additionally, an unused small underground chamber exists beneath the pyramid, perhaps reflecting changed plans during construction. Archaeologists have never found Khufu's remains within the Great Pyramid. Where is Khufu's body? Or perhaps this isn't actually Khufu's tomb. These questions await future archaeological discoveries to resolve, enigmas that keep the pyramid fascinating millennia after its construction. Besides the Great Pyramid, the 4th dynasty produced numerous breathtaking monuments. After Khufu's death, Khafre chose to build a slightly smaller pyramid, the world's 2nd largest pyramid. Built on higher ground, it appears even more majestic than the Great Pyramid, an optical illusion that demonstrates sophisticated understanding of visual perception. Khafre was likely Khufu's son or brother. The exact relationships remain unclear due to incomplete records. The Great Sphinx's actual builder remains debated. Some claim Khufu built it as a guardian for his pyramid. Others say Khafre created it in his own likeness, while still others attribute it to Djedefre, who built it in his father Khufu's image, a debate that may never be fully settled. Djedefre ruled between Khufu and Khafre and was allegedly murdered by Khafre, a dynastic struggle that hints at the political tensions behind the monumental calm. The Sphinx's missing nose has multiple explanations. One popular story claims Napoleon's artillery destroyed it in 1798 when the French leader, annoyed by its majestic appearance, ordered it shelled, though drawings made before Napoleon's time show the nose already missing. An earlier account suggests medieval Egyptian guards used the nose for target practice. Regardless, the missing nose has become an iconic feature of this enigmatic monument. While these magnificent buildings have stood for millennia as objects of wonder, their construction gradually emptied the royal treasury and exhausted the people, setting the stage for future dynastic decline, a pattern repeated throughout Egyptian history, where architectural ambition strained economic resources. From 2494 to 2345 BCE, Egypt entered the Fifth Dynasty, lasting approximately 150 years under 9 pharaohs, a period that saw the solar cult rise to prominence and pyramid construction continue on a slightly more modest scale. At Saqqara, the dynasty's final pharaoh, Unas, built the Old Kingdom's smallest pyramid. Here lie the best-preserved pyramid causeway and pyramid texts in ancient Egypt, precious evidence of the religious beliefs that underpinned pharaonic rule. These causeways faced the Nile, and pharaohs believed that after death, the Nile's life force would flow along these causeways toward the pyramid, granting them eternal afterlife, a hydraulic metaphor for spiritual renewal. Archaeologists discovered 2 contrasting worlds depicted on causeway walls. One side showed a prosperous, abundant world where people enjoyed fruits, beef, fish, and Egypt's natural bounty, an idealized vision of the good life. The other side presented horrifying scenes of people suffering from hunger, their weakness palpable even after thousands of years. These starving figures were Bedouins living on Egypt's periphery in chaotic, impoverished conditions. This disorder was creeping closer to the Nile Valley, and ancient Egypt's first crisis was brewing, a warning in stone about the fragility of civilization. On Unas's pyramid walls, archaeologists found the famous pyramid texts, spells blessing the king's successful journey up the pyramid steps or along its smooth surfaces to reach heaven, ensuring royal resurrection and rebirth. The most famous incantation declared, "Unas has not died, Unas has risen," a powerful affirmation of eternal life that would evolve into more elaborate funerary texts. Pyramid texts were ritual spells carved on pyramid walls during the late 5th and 6th dynasties, representing ancient Egyptian religious literature. These texts contained rich content, including mythology, astronomy, cosmology, religious ceremonies, morality, and historical records, a comprehensive guide to the Egyptian worldview. Notably, ancient Egyptians developed sophisticated astronomy, creating humanity's earliest solar calendar. During the early dynastic period, they established a 365-day year based on Nile flooding patterns, a practical response to agricultural needs. By the Old Kingdom, they refined this, by incorporating the heliacal rising of Sirius as the New Year's beginning, a celestial event that marked the Nile's annual flood with remarkable accuracy. Since Sirius's heliacal rising cycle wasn't perfectly consistent, clever Egyptians calculated that after 120 years, the rising date shifted by 1 month compared to 120 years earlier. After exactly 1,461 years, the rising date returned to mark the New Year's beginning, a cycle they called the Sothic period. Their calculations closely matched modern astronomical calculations, and their precise calendar greatly promoted agricultural development, providing convenient conditions for production and daily life. A scientific achievement with practical benefits. In ancient times, whoever mastered accurate calendars possessed advanced agriculture and basic survival guarantees, the foundation of ancient Egypt's brilliant civilization. The pyramid texts reflected beliefs that the dead became stars in heaven. They contained numerous spells, with content written not in hieroglyphics, but in a script called hieratic, a cursive form better suited for rapid inscription. Not only royalty and nobility wrote texts in burial chambers, commoners also inscribed them in their coffins, leading to their designation as coffin texts. These gradually replaced pyramid texts, becoming the source for New Kingdom and later papyrus scroll texts and Book of the Dead writings, a democratization of afterlife expectations. Ancient Egyptians practiced Egyptian mythology, mysterious and captivating beliefs that emerged around 3000 BCE during the First Dynasty period. From the First through Fourth Dynasties, Egyptians revered Horus, believing pharaohs were Horus's descendants and earthly representatives. Horus, son of Osiris and Isis, was the sky god, appearing in falcon form. Pharaohs' names typically featured a falcon symbol, a visible connection between ruler and deity. Horus wore the Egyptian crown, a short kilt, and held the was scepter and ankh symbol, representing royal power, iconography that would remain consistent for millennia. Ancient Egyptian religion was polytheistic, with gods appearing in 3 forms: animal, human, and abstract. The cow goddess Hathor, mentioned earlier, exemplified animal form and was also Horus's wife, a divine marriage that mirrored human relationships. Imhotep, mentioned previously, was deified after death as the god of healing, representing human form divinity, a rare case of a mortal achieving godhood. Abstract gods included Bes, who governed music and dance, deities representing concepts rather than natural phenomena. Egyptians believed souls traveled to the underworld after death, viewing the body as the soul's container. They thought souls left bodies nightly, returning each morning. Even souls followed regular schedules. This belief in daily renewal informed their optimistic view of the afterlife. Believing in soul resurrection after death, they preserved bodies as soul dwellings, leading to mummification and embalming techniques that became increasingly sophisticated over time. During mummification, internal organs were placed in 4 canopic jars, guarded by Horus's sons. Imseti, human-headed, protected the liver. Hapi, baboon-headed, protected the lungs. Duamatef, jackal-headed, protected the stomach. Kebesanuef, falcon-headed, protected the intestines, a systematic approach to preserving the body for eternity. Egyptian mythology deserves separate discussion due to its complexity. Perhaps we'll explore it thoroughly in a future episode. For now, we continue our chronological journey through Egyptian history. From 2345 to 2181 BCE, following the 5th dynasty's end, Egypt entered the 6th dynasty under 7 pharaohs. One pharaoh, Pepi II, lived over 100 years, remarkable for 2000 plus BCE, when even today few reach such age. Royal living conditions were clearly exceptional, though even they couldn't guarantee immunity from the period's challenges. During this period, Egyptian worship gradually shifted from Horus to the sun god Ra. Transformed from Heliopolis's local deity to Egypt's national god, leading the Ennead, 9 primary gods: Ra, sun god; Shu, air and wind god; Tefnut, moisture goddess; Geb, earth god; Nut, sky goddess; Osiris, underworld and agriculture god, Horus's father; Isis, life, magic, marriage and fertility goddess, Horus's mother; Set, war, desert, storm. One wonders if the 9 pillars in Demon Slayer drew inspiration from Egyptian mythology. This religious shift wasn't mere preference. It reflected massive social changes in ancient Egypt. By the 6th dynasty's end, Egypt faced increasingly severe drought. Food shortages destabilized the nation. As Horus's earthly representative, the pharaoh's inability to change circumstances led people to question royal power, divine nature, and Egypt's entire social order, a crisis of legitimacy that would have profound consequences. Simultaneously, provincial governors' expanding power threatened Memphis's central authority. Internal conflicts erupted frequently, and central government faced collapse, the beginning of a dark period known as the First Intermediate Period. From 2181 to 2040 before the Common Era, this dark era became known as Ancient Egypt's First Intermediate Period, spanning 5 dynasties of weakened central authority. Around 2181 before the Common Era, the extremely brief 7th dynasty lasted only 70 days, with 70 pharaohs, 1 pharaoh per day. This marked Egypt's first chaotic dynasty, a numerical exaggeration that symbolizes the period's instability. Central government could no longer maintain economic stability. Years of pyramid construction had emptied the treasury. Food shortages and political disputes escalated into famine and small-scale civil wars. Egypt's domestic situation became turbulent with warlord fragmentation, a classic pattern of state collapse. From 2181 to 2130 BCE, the 7th and 8th dynasties, though based in Memphis and maintaining 6th dynasty traditions, controlled only that immediate region. The unified central monarchy existed in name only, a phantom of its former self. Archaeologist discoveries from a noble named Ankhtifi's tomb revealed contemporary conditions. Managing Upper Egypt's third nome, his tomb described the era's horrific circumstances. Due to famine and severe food shortages, exacerbated by the Old Kingdom's early prosperity, causing population growth and increased food demand, combined with later periods' massive construction projects that impoverished the nation. These interconnected factors culminated in tragedy, a cautionary tale about overextension. Popular revolts reduced royal power, while economic decline encouraged rampant tomb robbing. Subsequent rulers abandoned costly pyramid construction, instead excavating secret underground tombs in remote mountains, a practical response to changed circumstances. Later kings chose burial in this location, which gradually evolved into the exclusive royal necropolis with military fortifications and generational guards, thus creating the Valley of the Kings, a hidden cemetery that would protect royal remains for centuries. By 2160 BCE, Heracleopolis rulers unified Lower Egypt, establishing the 9th dynasty, while Thebes's Intef family unified Upper Egypt, creating the 10th dynasty. Ancient Egypt split again into competing power centers. These two dynasties coexisted for 90 years, frequently clashing at Abydos, ironically the burial site of Egypt's first two dynasties. War's flames even reached ancient rulers' resting places, burning royal tombs and destroying mummies within, a desecration that symbolized the complete breakdown of tradition. For the first time, ancient Egypt's historical continuity was severed, breaking the ancestral lineage, a psychological blow as well as a political one. Due to Akhenaten's excessive obsession with religious matters, Egypt's influence abroad began to decline, marking the beginning of a clear deterioration in national power. The pharaoh's indifference to political activities beyond his religious reforms undoubtedly sparked major troubles for the Egyptian empire, which had learned from the experiences of its predecessors. Akhenaten found himself in serious conflict with the king of Mitanni, leading him to forge an alliance with the Hittites. These formidable warriors, under their leader Suppiluliuma I, were launching attacks against Mitanni to establish their own dominance. Many Asian vassal kings who had submitted to Egypt also faced threats from the Hittites. They could only appeal for help from the pharaoh far away in Africa. But Akhenaten ignored their pleas entirely. This led to a weakening of Egyptian control over Asia during his reign, a strategic retreat from empire. During Akhenaten's rule, other significant events occurred, including a plague that may have been the world's first major pandemic outbreak. This plague was also recorded in the first chapter of Exodus in the Bible, a historical convergence that suggests real events behind the biblical narrative. According to biblical accounts, Pharaoh Akhenaten had imprisoned the Jewish people in Egypt. Moses, seeking freedom for his people, prayed to God to spread plague throughout Egypt. Egypt became a scene of devastation. The river turned red, fish died en masse, and frogs, insects, and flies swarmed everywhere before the plague erupted, a description that matches volcanic effects. This plague spread from Egypt throughout the Middle East, killing Suppiluliuma I, the king of the Hittite New Kingdom, a demographic catastrophe that reshaped the... But is there a scientific explanation for this disaster? Scientists have discovered volcanic rock fragments in the Nile River. Analysis revealed that these fragments came from a volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini. The volcano's tremendous energy hurled volcanic ash hundreds of miles to Egypt, where the acidic compounds and sulfur content in the ash turned the river red and contaminated the water quality, ultimately leading to this catastrophe, a natural disaster with human consequences. This plague caused the rapid decline of the city of Akhetaten. Shortly after Akhenaten's death, the city was abandoned. Many scholars believe that a powerful Egyptian empire came to an end here, a dramatic collapse that ended the Amarna period. The preserved artistic images of Akhenaten show him with extremely peculiar features: elongated limbs, a protruding belly, and wide hips. This has led to some strange theories, such as suggestions that Akhenaten was actually a woman disguised as a man, or that he suffered from some form of gender disorder. Another theory explains the pharaoh's strange appearance as being caused by Marfan syndrome, which may have been a genetic problem resulting from the ancient Egyptian rulers' practice of incestuous marriage to maintain royal bloodline purity, a biological price paid for political exclusivity. After Akhenaten's death, his son-in-law, who may also have been his son, inherited the throne. Under pressure from the Amen priesthood and nobility, he was forced to compromise with the Amen priests, ending the religious reforms and restoring worship of the god Amen. He returned the confiscated property to Amen temples and granted them substantial new wealth, while moving the capital back to Thebes, a complete reversal of his predecessor's policies. This pharaoh was the famous Tutankhamun, regarded as the incarnation of Amen. What miraculous stories would unfold around this pharaoh? Tutankhamun is one of ancient Egypt's most famous pharaohs, not because of his most remarkable achievements, but because of the numerous, fascinating topics surrounding him that captivate people's imagination. Tutankhamun's tomb was preserved remarkably intact, remaining undisturbed for over 3,000 years, until its discovery by British archaeologist Howard Carter in 1922, who excavated a vast treasure trove. The tomb contained over 2,000 artifacts with incredibly rich treasures that shocked the Western world. The discovery of his tomb represented the pinnacle of Egyptian archaeological work, and Tutankhamun's tomb became another symbol of ancient Egypt, following the pyramids, a symbol of mystery and splendor. However, It's worth noting that 80% of the items in Tutankhamun's tomb may have been repurposed second-hand goods. The original owners of these items likely belonged to Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Since Akhenaten's religious reforms had angered the Amun priesthood, the best fate for these objects was to be reworked into burial goods for Tutankhamun, accompanying him into death and becoming part of history, a practical recycling of valuable materials. Regarding Tutankhamun, the most famous story is undoubtedly the pharaoh's curse. Let's review what this curse was all about. Ever since Howard Carter's team entered Tutankhamun's tomb, Lord Carnarvon, who had financed the excavation, suddenly died within a month. Besides him, over the following 3 years, 22 people involved in the excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb died under mysterious circumstances. According to rumors, Tutankhamun's tomb bore an inscription that read, "Wherever disturbs the pharaoh's peace shall have death descend upon his head." It seemed the pharaoh's terrible curse had been fulfilled. Over the following decades, through various films and novels that sensationalized the story, the pharaoh's curse became increasingly supernatural, not only deterring grave robbers, but also causing many archaeologists and tourists to worry. A powerful narrative that captured public imagination. So, is there a scientific explanation for the pharaoh's curse? Let's first address that eerie inscription. Common pharaonic tomb inscriptions, or warnings to potential tomb robbers, typically mentioned possible misfortunes, such as being eaten by crocodiles while swimming in the Nile, or being bitten to death by hippos. While these words were ominous, they weren't malicious. After archaeologists deciphered the text on Tutankhamun's tomb, they discovered that the supposed curse inscription simply didn't exist. This phrase was actually fabricated by 20th century news reporters seeking sensational headlines, an early example of media sensationalism. At the time, Tutankhamun's tomb was being reported by various news agencies, leading to such false news. Even now, this amounts to malicious clickbait journalism. These media outlets probably only cared about revenue, not truth. They couldn't even afford pickled vegetables anymore. So since the pharaoh's curse was entirely fictional, how do we explain these mysterious deaths? Scientists have proven that among the first group of people to enter Tutankhamun's tomb, only about 5% died unnaturally. If there was anything abnormal, it was probably because the tomb's enclosed space contained bacteria that hadn't evolved alongside the outside air, creating independent evolutionary strains that humans had never encountered and couldn't resist. A biological rather than supernatural explanation. Additionally, the first group to enter the tomb had virtually no protective equipment. They merely placed orange peels under their noses to mask some of the tomb's odor, which couldn't possibly isolate them from unknown fungal spores, thus leading to accidental deaths. A lesson in archaeological safety. Lord Carnarvon died because he was bitten by a mosquito in Tutankhamun's tomb, and later, while shaving, he cut the bitten area, leading to infection and ultimately death from blood poisoning, a tragic but medically explicable chain of events. Regarding Tutankhamun's cause of death, there are currently various theories, including murder and illness. However, I believe one explanation comes closest to the truth. Through DNA testing, scientists identified a mummy called the Younger Lady as Tutankhamun's biological mother. This mummy died in a ghastly manner, with huge tears around the mouth, indicating she suffered inhumane treatment, a violent end that suggests political intrigue. This murder was likely committed by extremists opposed to Akhenaten's religious reforms. Past historians thought the Younger Lady was Tutankhamun's mother, meaning Akhenaten's queen Nefertiti, but DNA research confirmed that Tutankhamun's biological mother was also the daughter of Amenhotep III and Queen T, making her Akhenaten's sister. In other words, Tutankhamun was born from siblings, a genetic background that would have consequences. In the 18th dynasty's Theban family, this incestuous marriage pattern persisted for at least 2.5 centuries. Tutankhamun's father, Akhenaten's strange appearance and short life suggest he too may have suffered greatly from this practice, a dynasty consuming itself through inbreeding. Tutankhamun's genetic defects were severe. He died at just 19 years old. Using virtual autopsy technology, scientists reconstructed Tutankhamun's facial features and body shape. His health condition was extremely poor, suffering from multiple diseases, including clubfoot, which made walking difficult and required the use of canes. This explains why his tomb contained over 130 walking sticks. He also suffered from malaria and buck teeth, a portrait of physical suffering behind the golden mask. Tutankhamun's tomb yielded numerous chariots. These chariots not only demonstrated that Egyptian chariot craftsmen had reached an exceptional level of engineering skill, but may also indicate that Tutankhamun enjoyed racing despite his difficulty walking, a poignant contrast between physical limitation and royal aspiration. Through virtual autopsy, scientists discovered that his injuries were concentrated on one side of his body. Crash reconstruction experts conducted detailed vehicle collision computer simulations, concluding that a two-wheeled chariot had run over him, breaking his ribs and pelvis and crushing his heart. A tragic accident that may have caused his premature death. This explains why among all discovered pharaonic mummies, Tutankhamun is the only pharaoh without a heart. Obviously, the accident left his heart too damaged to repair. Without a heart, Tutankhamun clearly couldn't pass through the Hall of Judgment smoothly. Ancient Egyptians believed that a deceased person's heart had to undergo judgment by Osiris in the Hall of Judgment. As we mentioned earlier, Osiris was the son of Geb, god of the earth, and Nut, goddess of the sky, the lord of the underworld, who judged whether the deceased could achieve eternal life. Osiris would weigh the heart against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth. If the heart was heavier than the feather due to sin, it would be thrown to the monster Ammit to be devoured, and the soul would never be reborn. If lighter than the feather, one could safely pass. A moral accounting that emphasized ethical behavior. Without a heart, Tutankhamun certainly couldn't be reborn. However, clever ancient Egyptians always found solutions. Now that they had the story, why not commercialize it? Clever ancient Egyptians thought of using scarab beetles, commonly called dung beetles, to protect their hearts and ensure safe passage to the afterlife. A symbolic substitution that addressed the practical problem. Why use dung beetles? Ancient Egyptians had very different views of excrement from today. In ancient times, human and animal waste was used as fertilizer, sometimes for pottery glazes, or as fuel for fires and cooking. It was even used as medicine to treat diseases. Fever and cold were no problem. A mouthful of hot dung would help you. A practical approach to available materials. Ancient Egyptians noticed that each day the round sun rose in the east and set in the west, just like the round dung balls that scarabs rolled. The sun promoted new life, and scarab larvae were also born from dung balls. What a coincidence! So ancient Egyptians viewed the dung balls pushed by scarabs as incarnations of the sun, and scarabs as sun gods, giving birth to the sun god Khepri. A beautiful example of finding cosmic patterns in everyday phenomena. In burials, ancient Egyptians would place scarab mummies or create scarab amulets to place over the heart, seeking protection from the sun god Khepri to ensure safe passage to the afterlife. On Tutankhamun's chest was just such an exquisite scarab amulet, a beautiful object with profound spiritual significance. Since we're discussing animal mummies, let's elaborate further. For ancient Egyptians, worshipping animal deities was an important part of religious life. They would express their devotion through statues or animal mummies, praying for these animal gods to protect them from disasters in this life and grant them peace in the afterlife. These animal mummies led archaeologists to discover something very interesting. Animal mummies can be traced back to the first dynasty. People discovered large quantities of animal mummies at Saqqara. Crocodiles, cats, ibises, bulls, and others, each associated with specific gods. For example, ibises were linked to Thoth, the moon god, and cats to Bastet, the cat goddess. A complex symbolic system connecting animals and deities. Archaeologists originally assumed that whatever animal shape a mummy took, it would contain the corresponding animal remains inside. However, CT scans revealed something shocking. Ancient Egyptians were apparently among the world's first fraudsters. They discovered that some animal mummies contained sand, stones, reeds, and other materials. Remarkably, these fake content mummies comprised about 2/3 of the total. A surprising revelation about ancient religious practices. Why did this happen? Archaeologists analyzed that pilgrims coming to Saqqara would purchase animal mummies from priests and bury them. As the animal mummy business grew increasingly profitable and supply couldn't meet demand, priests began substituting fake contents, an early example of economic factors influencing religious practice. These priests probably didn't feel guilty while making huge profits, because they convinced pilgrims that regardless of what was inside, the divine power of animal mummies remained the same. A theological justification for commercial shortcut. Getting a bit off track, let's return to our main character, Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun inherited the throne at age 9. Many people assumed such a young pharaoh would lose control in the palace court. However, some ancient tomb scenes suggest this may not have been the case. This boy pharaoh left his mark at Luxor Temple, overseeing repairs to the courtyard walls built around the great colonnade that Amenhotep III had constructed. He also built a beautiful red granite sphinx for Karnak, evidence that his reign involved significant architectural activity despite his youth. Tutankhamun was actually an independent pharaoh who didn't rely on any ministers. He not only firmly grasped power, but was even an excellent military commander. Although he was unlikely to participate in combat personally, during his reign, Horemheb successfully fought against the Hittites in Syria and won several battles, military successes that occurred under his rule. The Hittites had seized much Syrian territory during Akhenaten's obvious disinterest in foreign policy. Tutankhamun successfully led wars against Nubia and Syria, dying 1 year after launching the Syrian campaign. A short but active reign. Horemheb was the last pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. His military career began during Akhenaten's time, and during Tutankhamun's reign, he was appointed as the pharaoh's deputy. Before him was another pharaoh called Ai, originally a high priest who married Tutankhamun's wife, Ankhesenamun, after Tutankhamun's death, then ascended to the pharaoh's throne, a succession that suggests possible political maneuvering. Like Ai, we have very limited information about Horemheb. He formally became pharaoh after Ai. During Horemheb's reign, Egypt prospered greatly, and he restored foreign territories by rebuilding trade expeditions, a period of recovery after the Amarna interlude. In 1292 BCE, Horemheb died, choosing a professional general named Paramesu as his successor. This man became the founder of Egypt's 19th dynasty, Ramesses I. What exciting stories would unfold in the 19th dynasty? From 1295 to 1189 BCE, Ramesses I founded the second dynasty of the New Kingdom period, the 19th dynasty. Shortly after Ramesses I's accession, he designated his son Seti I as regent to rule jointly with him. His son was already a military commander at the time, eager to reclaim Syria and restore Egypt's former position there, a dynastic partnership that would characterize the period. Ramesses I's reign was surprisingly brief. He ruled for only 1 year and 4 months before dying. He was buried in the Valley of the Kings in a hastily constructed tomb near Horemheb's tomb. Ramesses I's mummy was sold to Canada during the 19th century Egyptian mummy trafficking, later transferred to the United States. Through a series of modern scientific tests, his identity was confirmed as the founding pharaoh of Egypt's 19th dynasty. He was finally returned to Egypt in 2003. It seems Americans are more honorable than Germans in this regard. After Ramesses I's death, Seti I formally ascended the throne. He was militarily vigorous, rebuilding Egypt's army upon accession to recover territories lost in Syria and Palestine during Akhenaten's time. He attacked the city of Tyre and fought against the Hittites, later establishing treaties. A successful military campaign that restored Egyptian prestige. Tyre was an ancient Phoenician city, now Lebanon's fourth largest city. In the 16th century BCE, it had been an Egyptian vassal state, but fell under Hittite rule in the 14th century BCE, a valuable trading center worth contesting. During Seti I's reign, he undertook massive construction projects, building many magnificent structures, including the Great Hypostyle Hall at Karnak Temple. He also built the largest tomb ever constructed in the Valley of the Kings, a fitting resting place for a great pharaoh. This underground tomb complex, with its 174-meter-long corridors, had floors, ceilings, and walls that displayed the power and return of Egypt's traditional religious system, representing the revival of ancient Egyptian art and culture during Seti's era. The tomb chamber depicted Seti I surrounded by gods, connecting him with Egypt's past rulers to demonstrate his complete legitimacy. Seti I's tomb also depicted the ancient Egyptians' vision of the underworld. Ancient Egyptians believed the underworld had 12 gates to test the pharaoh. These tomb contents served as maps of the underworld and secrets to help the pharaoh pass through, a detailed guide to the afterlife. After Seti I came his son Ramesses II, who was about 25 years old at succession. This gave him sufficient ambition and strong self-awareness. He wanted his achievements to surpass all predecessors. This pharaoh, one of the most famous in ancient Egyptian history, indeed lived a legendary life full of dramatic color. His reign marked the final golden age of Egypt's new kingdom. During Ramesses II's reign, he conducted a series of expeditions, restoring control over Palestine. He engaged in multiple wars with the contemporary great power, the Hittite Empire, centered in Anatolia. The most famous battle occurred in 1274 BCE, when both sides clashed at Kadesh on the Orontes River. The Battle of Kadesh. The Battle of Kadesh was one of the earliest recorded major battles in ancient military history. According to records, Egypt deployed 2,000 two-wheeled chariots and 16,000 infantry, while the Hittite Empire fielded 3,000 two-wheeled chariots and 20,000 infantry. A massive confrontation for the era. Although the Battle of Kadesh was the largest collision between the main forces of both sides, it wasn't a decisive engagement. Subsequently, both sides became mired in years of bitter warfare, with neither able to completely defeat the other. The prolonged war exhausted both sides' capacity to continue fighting. at the Hittite Empire's suggestion. Both sides signed the Egyptian-Hittite peace treaty in 1259 BCE. This is the earliest surviving written international military treaty in history. The treaty stipulated permanent peace between both sides, with no future hostilities, and maintenance of good peace and brotherly relations. Both sides agreed to mutual military assistance against any invading enemies and committed not to accept each other's fugitives, with obligations to extradite escapees. A comprehensive agreement that established lasting peace. It's a classic case of no fighting, no friendship. After the battle, they became brothers. This wasn't enough. After signing the treaty, the Hittite king gave his daughter in marriage to Ramesses II, further solidifying their alliance through political marriage, a diplomatic masterstroke. The Egypt-Hittite struggle for supremacy was a major event in ancient Middle Eastern history. Interestingly, both sides declared victory in their domestic propaganda. Moreover, both powerful empires coincidentally declined after signing the peace treaty, a synchronization that suggests broader regional factors at work. During Ramesses II's time, a severe drought lasting 150 years began, devastating multiple civilizations. Thanks to ancient Egypt's advanced agricultural knowledge, they had already mastered plant hybridization techniques and cultivated more drought-resistant crops. They survived better than most. They also invented water gauges, measuring Nile water depth to predict agricultural yields and minimize drought impact. This enabled ancient Egypt to endure this disaster for an extended period, even providing aid to the Hittites, a testament to their agricultural sophistication. The peace treaty with the Hittite Empire brought Egypt a period of tranquility, providing opportunities for the 19th dynasty to create numerous magnificent buildings. Ramesses II was more prolific in construction than any other Egyptian pharaoh. Egypt had been a construction site for over 3,000 years. During his reign, he ordered construction of temples, palaces, statues, and monuments in incredible numbers. He didn't hesitate to appropriate some more ancient buildings. Some were restored with his name carved on them. Others were incorporated into new building complexes he commissioned. And still others were demolished to provide materials for new construction. A pragmatic approach to architectural glory. Among Ramesses II's new projects was a new capital city whose luxury rivaled Egypt's other two great cities, Memphis and Thebes. This city was called Ramesses, meaning House of Ramesses. The city was located in the eastern Nile Delta, on the site of ancient Avaris. Ramesses II built this city not just for pleasure, but for military and strategic purposes. The city was close to the vulnerable eastern border, which had frequently suffered foreign invasions. Additionally, it was an important commercial crossroads connecting Egypt and Asia, a strategic location that could serve defensive purposes. However, this city declined more than a century after Ramesses II's death due to the drying up of tributary channels and reduced economic benefits. By the 21st dynasty, the pharaohs had moved the capital to Tanis. This ancient art of capital relocation was mastered once again, and this once glorious city eventually faded into obscurity, a reminder that even great cities are subject to environmental change. Abu Simbel Temple is considered Ramesses II's greatest masterpiece and a true architectural treasure of the ancient world. Located on the western bank of Lake Nasser, carved 60 meters deep into rock, it was supposedly dedicated to three main gods, Amun, Ra, and Pa, but actually served only one true deity, Ramesses II himself. We haven't previously introduced Pa. He was Memphis's patron god, regarded as the creator of all things, a fundamental deity in the Egyptian pantheon. Abu Simbel Temple's fate was somewhat troubled. Shortly after completion, an earthquake caused massive damage, with many columns and statues breaking. The damaged sections included the entire upper portion of the temple's facade. Most damaged areas were later repaired, but the architects were helpless with the broken statues. The temple we see today is actually its post-relocation appearance. In 1960, Egyptian President Nasser ordered construction of the Aswan High Dam. Upon completion, the reservoir would form an artificial lake over 500 kilometers long, converting much barren land to farmland. This was a project of vital national importance, but it would permanently submerge many relics of pharaonic civilization, including Abu Simbel Temple. Subsequently, UNESCO issued an alert to the world, launching a genuine rescue operation. Countries worldwide extended helping hands, providing Egypt with manpower, funding, and technology. They successfully relocated Abu Simbel Temple to a location 180 meters from its original site and 65 meters higher. An international effort to preserve heritage. The entire project took 5 years, employed over 2,000 workers, and utilized costs and archaeological techniques never before seen in archaeological history. Simultaneously, the temple's solar festival was preserved as much as possible. Ancient Egyptians precisely applied astronomical, mathematical, and geographical knowledge to design the temple so that only on Ramesses II's birthday and the temple's foundation day would sunlight penetrate through the temple entrance, travel through 60 meters of temple corridor, and illuminate the colossal stone statue of Ramesses II in the temple's inner sanctuary. Giant stone sculptures beside it would remain untouched by the sun's rays, except for this phenomenon. People called this miraculous occurrence the Solar Festival, a stunning demonstration of astronomical alignment. To preserve the Solar Festival spectacle, UNESCO organized fundraising, deployed the world's leading scientific and technical personnel, used the most advanced scientific measurement methods, and exerted every effort. Ultimately, the Solar Festival timing was still off by 1 day due to miscalculation. A humble reminder of the limits of modern technology compared to ancient wisdom. Nevertheless, this demonstrated that ancient Egyptians' mastery of astronomy was quite sophisticated. Near Abu Simbel Temple stands another temple dedicated to his first queen, Nefertari, The small temple. The temple facade features 6 statues, 4 of Ramesses II and 2 depicting Nefertari in the form of the goddess Hathor, a rare instance of a queen receiving such prominent representation. Around the 24th year of his reign, this queen died, and construction on this temple ceased, never reaching completion, an unfinished tribute to a beloved wife. The year Ramesses II died, all of Egypt was preparing to celebrate the pharaoh's Sed festival. This festival began in the 30th year of each reigning pharaoh's rule and was held every 3 years thereafter. Since Ramesses II sometimes held it every 2 years, he had celebrated no fewer than 14 such festivals by his death, a record that reflected his unprecedented longevity. To many Egyptians and even foreigners, Ramesses II seemed truly the incarnation of the gods, or at least divinely favored. When he reached 70, 80, and even 90 years old, many Egyptians began believing their pharaoh would rule forever, a living god who defied normal human limits. But Ramesses II couldn't wait for the celebration to begin. He died, plunging the entire Egyptian dynasty into grief and dealing a major blow to the 19th dynasty. For almost all Egyptians of the time, apart from Ramesses II, they knew no other pharaoh. Only those with exceptional longevity remembered scenes from when Ramesses II's father, Seti I, was in power. And given ancient Egyptians' lifespan, there weren't many such people nationwide. For ordinary Egyptians to live past 30 was already quite remarkable, a demographic reality that made Ramesses' reign seem truly eternal. So after the death of Ramesses II, who people regarded as a god, where would the 19th dynasty go? In 1213 BCE, Ramesses II, who had lived 90 years, died. His reign represented the 19th dynasty's most prosperous era, matched by his enormous family. He had married 8 queens, along with countless concubines, and fathered over 100 children, a prolific lineage that should have ensured succession. His longevity meant that many designated heirs predeceased him, forcing Ramesses II to repeatedly select new successors. The one who inherited after him was 13th on the succession list, Merenptah. Poor Merenptah had never imagined he would ascend the throne, being already about 70 years old at succession, an elderly ruler for challenging times. During Merenpeth's reign, Egypt suffered invasions by the Philistines and Libyans. The Philistines, also known as the Sea Peoples, were ancient inhabitants of the southeastern Mediterranean coast and possibly history's earliest pirates. By this period, they had widely adopted iron tools and possessed formidable strength, a new military threat. From the late 13th century BCE onwards, powerful nations around the Mediterranean had all suffered harassment from the Philistines. The Philistines later occupied territory equivalent to modern Gaza Strip. Ancient Greeks called the Philistines' homeland Palestine, meaning land of the Philistines. This is the origin of the name Palestine, a linguistic legacy that continues to this day. Inheriting the weakened dynasty, Merenpath ultimately defeated the invading Philistines and Libyans. These events were recorded on the Merenpath stele, an important historical document that also contains the first known reference to Israel outside the Bible. In 1203 BCE, Merenpath died, and his son Seti II succeeded him. This period saw Egypt experience a brief period of division, with Upper Egypt being ruled by a separatist leader named Amenmesse. Information about him is very limited. He was possibly one of Ramesses II's numerous descendants. Around 1200 BCE, Seti II defeated Amenmesse and reunified the country, a short-lived reunion before further decline. Tuzret became the last pharaoh of the 19th dynasty. She was Seti II's wife. Before her, there was another pharaoh, Siptah, Seti II's brother, and one of Merentau's sons. A confused succession that reflected the dynasty's instability. During Queen Tuzret's final period of rule, a slave uprising occurred in Egypt, the Irsu Rebellion. At this time, the Egyptian government had completely collapsed. Irsu was possibly a Syrian-born slave who launched an uprising through force and seized power. This uprising directly overthrew the tottering 19th dynasty, a social revolution from below. The one who finally suppressed this uprising was Setnakte, founder of the 20th dynasty. After Setnakte's brief 3-year rule ended, the king with real power, Ramesses III, took control. In 1186 before the Common Era, Setnakte died, and 31-year-old Ramesses III formally ascended the throne. Ramesses III's life was one of constant warfare. During this period, the Philistines and Libyans began more frequent invasions of Egypt. Although Ramesses III ultimately successfully defended against them, consolidating the Egyptian kingdom and achieving brief peace, military success came at the cost of the people's livelihood. A familiar pattern of military triumph leading to domestic strain. Warfare depleted Egypt's strength, leading to domestic economic recession and increased unrest. During this time occurred history's first recorded strike. Because the treasury was depleted, workers building royal tombs didn't receive proper compensation. They took to the streets and government buildings to express their dissatisfaction, an early example of labor protest. Records show these workers had high social status. They built tombs for pharaohs and nobles and maintained close relationships with them. Although the strike was eventually resolved peacefully, the people and some nobles seemed to realize that this dynasty's crisis was quietly brewing, a warning sign of systemic problems. Ramesses III's successors, supported by various interest groups, began competing and plotting against each other. In 1155 before Common Era, Ramesses III, who had fought battles his entire life, was murdered by his wife Tia and son Pentaweret. The regicide Pentaweret then took power, a dramatic palace coup. However, this regicide didn't fare well. Within less than a year, he was arrested and executed by Crown Prince Ramesses IV. Ta reportedly committed suicide out of guilt, a tragic end to a violent conspiracy. This screaming mummy is the regicide Pentaweret. Archaeologists discovered this mummy was deliberately made in an unorthodox manner. He was wrapped in goat skin. Given ancient Egyptians' emphasis on the afterlife, this shows how much people despised this regicide, a posthumous punishment that reflected profound cultural values. The 20th dynasty after Ramesses III's death was like a downhill roller coaster. National power declined faster and faster. There were 8 subsequent rulers, all named Ramesses. By Ramesses VII's reign, Egypt suffered severe inflation, with grain prices rising threefold from previous levels. Famine, riots, corruption, and numerous other problems emerged continuously, gradually devouring this once glorious nation. A comprehensive collapse affecting all aspects of society. During this period, pharaohs could no longer protect royal tombs. Economic depression made tomb robbing more rampant. Even nobles and priests joined the ranks of tomb robbers, a sure sign of lost legitimacy. Many surviving documents about investigating and handling tomb robbers tell of these souls' tragic fate. Faith in the afterlife was the spiritual foundation of pharaonic rule, but now this faith showed signs of collapse, a dialogical crisis matching the material one. More terrifyingly, the growing power of high priests was weakening the kingdom and Pharaoh's authority. By the time of the last pharaoh, Ramesses XI, the pharaoh's influence had become extremely weak, a ruler in name only. In 1077 BCE, when Ramesses XI died, High Priest Smendes I seized power, establishing Egypt's 21st dynasty with its capital at Tanis, ruling Lower Egypt. Upper Egypt was ruled by Ramesses XI's Libyan son-in-law, High Priest Herihor. The country split in two, a formal division that ended the new kingdom. Egypt thus began the Third Intermediate Period, lasting 413 years through 5 dynasties, a long era of fragmentation and foreign influence. During this period, Libyans had already settled in the western Delta region, and their chieftains began claiming autonomous rule. In 945 BCE, Libyan Prince Shoshank I controlled the Delta region, establishing the Libyan dynasty. Subsequently, Shoshank I appointed his son as High Priest of Amun, temporarily unifying Egypt. This became the 22nd dynasty, lasting over 200 years, a period of foreign rule that nevertheless maintained Egyptian traditions. However, Egypt under Libyan rule was quite corrupt. They didn't care about Egypt's past and weren't interested in understanding this ancient culture. They only wanted to plunder Egypt's wealth. This led to later 22nd dynasty Libyan elites killing each other for profit, a short-sighted approach that weakened the state. In 818 BCE, Petabast I declared independence in the Delta region, establishing the 23rd dynasty. Egypt split again into competing power centers, In 730 BCE, rulers of Sais in the western Nile Delta declared independence, establishing the 24th dynasty, a proliferation of dynasties that reflected the country's fragmentation. A divided and chaotic Egypt could no longer resist any powerful foreign force. Remember Nubia to the south? This civilization, established by black people, had always appeared in Egyptian history as weak enemies, obedient invaders, slaves, and soldiers. Their last moment of glory was 1,000 years earlier, when they allied with the Hyksos during the Second Intermediate Period. Later, facing the powerful New Kingdom, they had virtually no room for resistance or counterattack. Forced to submit to Egypt for long periods, a history of domination that was about to be reversed. Now, seeing Egypt divided and chaotic, the once subjugated Nubians set their sights on the fertile black soil along the Nile. Paye, king of the Nubian kingdom of Kush, became history's first black pharaoh and founder of the 25th dynasty. After years of warfare, Paye unified the vast region from the Nile's second to sixth cataracts, forging a powerful nation. In 727 BCE, Paye invaded northward, occupying Thebes and eventually the Delta region, a dramatic reversal of historical roles. Subsequently, Paye's successor Shabaka systematically eliminated various factions and unified Egypt, a Nubian conquest that restored unity. Nubians were fanatical followers of traditional Egyptian religion. They were more Egyptian than the Egyptians themselves. The Nubian conquest of Egypt seemed more like reverence and preservation of ancient Egypt restored to its proper place, a cultural conservation effort as much as a military conquest. This temple at Jebel Barkal in northern Sudan was the Nubians' Karnak Temple, originally built by New Kingdom pharaohs to worship Amun and his wife Mut. Even after the Egyptians left, Nubians continued worshiping Amun there, perpetuating ancient Egyptian spiritual civilization, a faithful continuation of tradition. They also replicated ancient Egyptian pyramids. Though not as massive as the Giza pyramids, they sufficiently demonstrated Nubian passion for ancient Egyptian culture, an architectural homage to their northern neighbors. Compared to traditional Egyptian dynasties, 25th dynasty pharaoh selection was more flexible. However, candidate selection was controlled by military leaders, high officials, and queen mothers, who would eliminate candidates based on merit, a meritocratic element in succession. Compared to Egypt's ancient primogeniture system, this flexible succession avoided some incompetent or infant rulers ascending through birthright, enabling the 25th dynasty under Nubian rule to last nearly a century, a significant achievement. Had it not been for the terrible Assyrian invasion, they might have ruled much longer, a historical what if. We mentioned Assyria before, the Assyrian Empire, considered history's first military empire. This was Assyria around 1400 BCE. This is modern Assyria, with their advanced iron weapons and military supremacist ideology. Assyrians rampaged throughout Western Asia, unstoppable. Old friends the Hittites and Mitanni had long been destroyed by Assyria, and now these war demons had set their sights on Egypt, a terrifying new threat. After eliminating Egypt's various allies, in 674 BCE, Assyrians began attacking Egypt. Assyrians wore chainmail, golden helmets, armed to the teeth. They had light archers, heavy armored archers, heavy chariots, and cavalry units, a professional military machine. In contrast, were the lightly armored, bare-chested Nubians. It's hard to imagine this was a battle between contemporaries. The equipment disparity was too obvious, making the war's outcome predictable. Though the Nubians fought bravely, they were ultimately defeated, retreating all the way to their homeland in Nubia and never recovering. A technological mismatch with historical consequences. The Assyrian Empire's wars of conquest buried civilizations. Wherever their armies went, towns were burned and destroyed, wealth was plundered, and inhabitants were slaughtered or enslaved. When they reached Thebes, they obviously wouldn't reverence Egyptian gods. They extensively damaged and looted Egyptian temples, causing enormous losses to ancient Egyptian civilization. A cultural catastrophe. So facing such a powerful Assyrian empire, would ancient Egyptians submit to colonial rule, or would they rise up in resistance? The 25th dynasty, established by Black Nubians, ultimately fell before the well-equipped, militarily superior Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire completely occupied Egypt, beginning its colonial rule, a low point in Egyptian history. Psamtik I emerged as the hero of this era, perfectly exemplifying the principle. He who understands the times is a true hero. Originally a descendant of Sais rulers in the western Nile Delta, remnants of the 24th dynasty, when he saw the powerful Assyrian Empire crush the Nubians, he knew his opportunity had come. A pragmatic assessment of power realities. Keep the green hills, and you'll never lack firewood. Psamtik I briefly submitted to Assyria, gaining Assyrian protection. In 664 BCE, the Assyrian king appointed Psamtik I as Egyptian governor, establishing the 26th dynasty, the last dynasty of native Egyptian power with real strength. Ancient Egypt entered the late period, a final flowering before permanent foreign domination. Psamtik I's submission to Assyria was strategic, keeping quiet while developing strength. How could the proud incarnation of Horus willingly submit? During this period, Psamtik I rapidly consolidated various powers in the Nile Delta, laying the foundation for eventually expelling the Assyrian Empire. A patient strategy of biding time. In troubled times, heroes emerge from the ranks. In 654 BCE, the Assyrian Empire's brutal rule intensified internal contradictions, ultimately leading to civil war. Almost all Assyrian main forces were withdrawn. The long, patient Psamtik I seized the moment, defeated Assyrian remnants, marched south triumphantly to capture Thebes, and defeated the Nubians ruling Upper Egypt. Thus, the 26th dynasty completely unified the nation. While the Assyrian Empire was destroyed by the rising Neo-Babylonian kingdom and Median kingdom, a geopolitical shift that enabled Egyptian independence. Under Psamtik I's rule, Egypt showed signs of renaissance. He actively developed foreign trade, granted favorable treatment to Greek merchants, and established Greek colonial cities, while maintaining ancient religious and artistic traditions, a balanced approach that welcomed foreign influence while preserving native culture. Egypt prospered for over a century under 26th dynasty rule. The dynasty's last pharaoh was Psamtik III, who ascended in 526 BCE. His reign was extremely brief, less than 6 months, before facing a terrible enemy, the Achaemenid dynasty, also known as the First Persian Empire, history's first empire spanning Europe, Asia, and Africa, a superpower that would overwhelm Egypt. This young, inexperienced pharaoh fought desperately to resist invasion. In 525 BCE, Cambyses II, the Persian Empire's third emperor, led a massive army to conquer Egypt, defeating the 26th dynasty at the Battle of Pelusium and advancing to Egypt's capital, Memphis. Subsequently, the Egyptian naval commander defected. Memphis fell, and Psamtik III was captured, a swift collapse that ended native rule. According to accounts, Cambyses sent envoys to Memphis, urging Egyptians to surrender voluntarily to avoid further bloodshed. However, when Persian envoy ships reached Memphis's dock, over 200 people, including Persian envoys, were brutally killed and dismembered by Egyptians, a provocation that demanded severe response. Enraged, Cambyses declared that Egyptians would repay this blood debt tenfold. He ordered the execution of 2,000 nobles, including one of Psamtik III's sons, and enslaved his daughter, a brutal repression that established Persian authority. Psamtik III endured these humiliations, then was exiled to Susa, a city in Khuzestan province, where the famous Code of Hammurabi was unearthed. Psamtik III eventually died by drinking bull's blood after attempting to assassinate Cambyses, a tragic end for the last native pharaoh. The 26th dynasty ended, and Egypt became a province of the Persian Empire. Cambyses crowned himself Egyptian pharaoh, a foreign ruler adopting Egyptian titles. This marked Egypt's second foreign conquest after the Hyksos. From the 525 BCE invasion until 404 BCE expulsion, Persians ruled Egypt for over a century. History calls this Persian rule the 27th dynasty, or First Persian dynasty, a period of foreign domination. During Persian rule, Egypt experienced 4 major anti-Persian uprisings, a testament to continued resistance. In 404 BCE, Persian ruler Darius II died, and succession wars erupted among his heirs. Seeing Persian rule weakening, Psamtik V, descendant of 26th dynasty rulers, launched an uprising, expelled Persian rulers, established his capital at Sais, and founded the 28th dynasty, a brief restoration of native rule. Subsequently, ancient Egyptian dynasties rapidly succeeded each other. Psamtik V ruled only 5 years before being assassinated by rebels from Mendes, followed by the 29th dynasty. This was also a short-lived dynasty, notable only for allying with Sparta against the Persian Empire. A desperate attempt to maintain independence through foreign alliances. In 380 BCE, military leader Nectanebo I seized power from the 29th dynasty, establishing the 30th dynasty, the last native Egyptian dynasty. This period saw the creation of true Egyptian coinage. Early Egypt had its own trading rules, but hadn't produced actual currency, instead using different trade goods for various commercial scenarios. A barter economy that now modernized. For example, domestically, tomb-building craftsmen received payment in bread, beer, and other daily consumables. Ancient Egyptians invented a unit called deben. Buying a bag of wheat cost about 1 deben, while a bull cost 50 deben, a standardized value system. In foreign trade, they used bartering, each taking what they needed. Over time, ancient Egyptians began consciously using gold fragments as currency. However, as trade with Western Asia deepened, simple bartering couldn't meet social needs. To make trade smoother, they gradually introduced relatively standardized coinage, a economic development that facilitated commerce. The 30th dynasty ruled Egypt for 37 years. During this period, the Persian Empire repeatedly attacked Egypt. Egypt successfully defeated Persia multiple times by extensively employing Greeks from throughout the Mediterranean, even supporting Persian Western territories, a strategy of using foreign mercenaries against foreign enemies. However, Egyptian native armies failed to learn adequately from Greeks and Persians. Though their weapons improved somewhat, organizational methods and tactical arrangements progressed little, a military stagnation that would have consequences. This was partly the ruler's choice to suppress domestic competitors. After all, foreign mercenaries far from home were often more reliable than locals. But this also laid the groundwork for their eventual downfall, a strategic dilemma. On the Persian side, Egypt's repeated incitement of Persian Western forces greatly angered them, leading to their decision to permanently eliminate this threat. In 343 BCE, the Persian Empire returned with full preparation, having bribed almost all Greek cities to conquer Egypt decisively. Subsequently, both sides clashed at Pelusium, Egypt's gateway. Inferior in soldier quality, weapons, and preparation, Egypt was quickly defeated. Persians then advanced toward Thebes, with cities surrendering en route. The Persian Empire reoccupied all of Egypt, ending the 30th dynasty, a final end to native rule. Upper and Lower Egypt became a Persian province again, through such a pathetic yet helpless manner. History calls this second Persian rule the 31st dynasty. Unlike previous Persian rulers, This time Persia wasn't inclined toward clemency regarding Egypt. Instead, they intended to destroy Egypt, which had repeatedly undermined Persian rule. They dismantled Egypt's border fortifications, and occupying forces began looting Egyptian temples, seizing vast wealth from Egyptian priests, a systematic plundering of cultural treasures. After installing a governor and nominal puppet ruler in Egypt, Persia began withdrawing troops from the Nile region, but not before imposing tax rates far exceeding other territories, and economic exploitation that drained the country. Over the following decade, remaining garrison forces continued destroying ancient Egyptian civilization. They regularly suppressed the priestly class, demolished temples, and burned religious texts, a cultural vandalism that aimed to break Egyptian identity. Compared to ambitious pharaohs and foreign mercenaries, these social structures were the true foundation of ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptians' ability to mobilize repeated resistance against Persian military occupation relied on this temple system. This thorough devastation left ancient Egyptian civilization in grave danger, a critical threat to its survival. In 332 BCE, heaven sent Alexander the Great of Macedonia, who overthrew Persian rule in Egypt. Reportedly, Egypt surrendered without firing an arrow during the conquest. The world had long suffered under Persian oppression. To completely defeat Persia, Alexander briefly reorganized in Egypt and founded one of the world's most famous cities, Alexandria, still Egypt's most famous port city today, a lasting legacy of his brief presence. There, 24-year-old Alexander was formally crowned Pharaoh of Egypt, thus beginning Egypt's 32nd dynasty, a Macedonian chapter in Egyptian history. In 323 BCE, Alexander, who had built a vast empire, died young. Having left no clear successor, fierce succession struggles erupted within the empire. Soon, the Macedonian Empire, spanning 3 continents, disintegrated, with generals establishing independent kingdoms, a fragmentation that ended his dream of unity. In the Babylon Conference, Ptolemy became Egyptian governor, establishing his power base in Egypt. In 305 BCE, Ptolemy I declared himself king, establishing his capital at Alexandria and founding the Ptolemaic dynasty's nearly 300-year rule of Egypt, a Hellenistic period that would transform Egyptian culture. During Ptolemy I's reign, he encouraged cultural endeavors and developed commerce and industry. Most outstanding was Ptolemy I's personal commission of the world-renowned Library of Alexandria. The library's sole purpose was reportedly collecting all the world's books, realizing the dream of universal knowledge, an ambitious intellectual project. Ptolemaic dynasty pharaohs employed every means toward this goal, ordering searches of every ship entering Alexandria harbor. Any books found, regardless of nationality, were immediately added to the library's collection, an aggressive acquisition policy. Through various legitimate and illegitimate methods, the library rapidly became humanity's greatest early library. At its peak, it reportedly housed 500,000 various manuscripts, an incredible collection of ancient knowledge. Its establishment attracted numerous scholars. Archimedes, Euclid, and other famous scholars conducted research there. This greatly advanced ancient Western literature, mathematics, geography, astronomy, and other disciplines, a flowering of learning. The first authoritative version of Homer's epics emerged from the Library of Alexandria, a textual achievement of lasting importance. From the Old Kingdom to Ptolemaic periods, Egypt had produced numerous philosophical, poetic, literary, and other scientific works, with vast collections housed there, a repository of Egyptian intellectual achievement. Matching the library's fame was the Lighthouse of Alexandria, commissioned by Ptolemy II and considered one of the 7 wonders of the world. Built around 280 to 278 BCE, the lighthouse was severely damaged in earthquakes in 1303 and 1332. The Egyptian government attempted reconstruction in 1532, but couldn't complete it due to insufficient funds. Its remains still lie on the seabed of Alexandria's eastern harbor, a lost wonder awaiting underwater archaeology. Though the Ptolemaic dynasty had Greeks as the ruling class, they didn't suppress Egyptian cultural traditions, even building numerous Egyptian temples, a cultural coexistence that characterized their rule. This period saw Egyptian and Greek civilizations begin merging, including religious beliefs. Many deities began sharing divine attributes. Amun equated with Zeus, Horus with Apollo, Thoth with Hermes, etc. A theological synthesis. Ancient Egypt thus entered the Hellenistic era, a fusion of cultures. So where would the Ptolemaic dynasty, which brought prosperity, knowledge, wealth, and tolerance to ancient Egypt, lead the land? In 305 BCE, Egyptian governor Ptolemy I declared himself king, founding ancient Egypt's final dynasty, the Ptolemaic dynasty, which ruled for nearly 300 years. Due to the Hellenistic world's unified empire collapse and competing powers, frequent wars erupted among empire successors seeking territory and resources, making military expansion crucial, a context of constant warfare. Initially, the Ptolemaic dynasty's military primarily comprised imported Greeks. Ptolemy I attracted numerous Greeks by granting land to Greek soldiers, making Greeks the military majority, a colonial military structure. Simultaneously, Greeks initially entered Egypt as the ruling class. However, Ptolemaic rulers weren't attracted to establishing Greek-style government despite being Greek. Instead, they were drawn to and assimilated by Egypt's profound culture, a cultural attraction that shaped their rule. Rulers called themselves pharaohs and continued using Egypt's existing bureaucratic system, though native Egyptians held only minority, lower positions, with important and majority positions held by Greeks, a colonial administration that maintained Egyptian forms. Besides Greeks, Jews were extremely active in ancient Egypt during this time. Though their ancestors had suffered unfair treatment there, the Ptolemaic dynasty relocated tens of thousands of Jews from Palestine to Egypt for military service, a demographic policy that added another ethnic group. Jews reportedly comprised nearly one-fifth of the army, a significant military contribution. Additionally, the Ptolemaic dynasty hired numerous mercenaries from various places, including Ethiopian blacks, Galatians, Thracians, etc. These foreigners also settled in Egypt through mercenary service, living alongside native Egyptians, a multi-ethnic society. Multi-ethnic fusion also meant potential conflicts from cultural differences. Due to Greek-Egyptian cultural differences, Greeks and Egyptians frequently clashed initially. To ease these internal contradictions, a system emerged where Greeks followed Greek law and were judged by Greek courts, while Egyptians followed Egyptian law and were judged by Egyptian courts. A legal pluralism that managed diversity. When Greeks and Egyptians had disputes, special courts resolved their conflicts, a sophisticated judicial approach. Over time, Greeks and Egyptians gradually influenced each other. Greek became ancient Egypt's official language, with some Egyptians adopting Greek names, a linguistic shift. Intermarriage and cohabitation between the two peoples increased, with mutual acceptance. Some Greek-educated Egyptians could enter government and receive land grants, a limited social mobility. Similarly, Greeks were subtly influenced by Egyptian culture. Some Greeks began treating Egyptian gods as Greek deities, while others adopted Egyptian names, a cultural exchange in both directions. From burial artistic expressions, Greeks accepted Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife, while ancient Egyptians began adopting Greek realistic artistic styles, leading to flourishing religious art, an artistic synthesis. Economically, the Ptolemaic dynasty provided various favorable conditions to strengthen commercial competitiveness. They encouraged trade and improved production quality. The government improved the commercial environment by building harbors, roads, and re-excavating the Nile to Red Sea Canal. They even sent expeditions to develop new trade markets, making Egypt Arabian spices, Iberian silver, Indian gems, and even Chinese silk could all be found in Alexandria's markets, bringing substantial profits to government and merchants. A global trade network. By Ptolemy II's reign, Alexandria became Egypt's trade and export center, playing important roles in art and science through the Library of Alexandria, a cultural and economic capital. With ethnic and cultural integration and rapid development in economics, science, and art, early Ptolemaic dynasty Egypt presented a harmonious, prosperous scene, a high point of Hellenistic civilization. However, this contrasted sharply with the chaos within Ptolemaic royal family. As we know, ancient Egyptian royalty practiced incestuous marriage to maintain bloodline purity and consolidate rule. The Ptolemaic dynasty remarkably reversed historical progress by adopting this incestuous marriage form. Ptolemy II's wife was his sister, earning him the title Philadelphos, sister lover, a practice that would continue with disastrous consequences. From Ptolemy II onward, Ptolemaic rulers would marry their sisters, with couples ruling as co-monarchs, setting the stage for future palace intrigue. A dynastic pattern that weakened the royal line. In 221 BCE, Ptolemy IV ascended. This pharaoh reportedly indulged in pleasure, living dissolute while neglecting state affairs. Real power gradually fell to his two favorites, Eusebius and Agathocles, with Eusebius wielding primary control, a court dominated by favorites. This man was extremely cunning, using skillful political manipulation to have Ptolemy IV's uncle, brother, and mother successively executed without directly confronting Ptolemy IV. A ruthless consolidation of power. Ptolemy IV thus earned the ironic title, Philopator, father lover, quite darkly humorous given his family's fate. In 205 BCE, Ptolemy IV died. Regent ministers, fearing Queen Arsinoe III might claim the throne, concealed the king's death for about a year before murdering the queen and seizing regency, a bloody succession. However, since Arsinoe III was beloved by Egyptians, news of her death triggered continuous popular uprisings, a political crisis sparked by royal murder. Subsequently, 5-year-old Ptolemy V ascended. His accession decree was carved on a stone called the Rosetta Stone, an artifact that would later prove crucial to deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphs. The stone bore identical content in Greek script, hieroglyphics, and Demotic script, enabling modern archaeologists to compare versions and decode the long-lost meaning and structure of Egyptian hieroglyphics, making it a crucial milestone in rescuing ancient Egyptian history, an accidental preservation of immense importance. Returning to Ptolemy V, this young monarch obviously couldn't prevent ambitious court ministers from assuming regency. After expelling regents Eusebius and Agathocles, another group of ambitious ministers seized Ptolemy V's regency, a revolving door of court factions. Ptolemaic dynasty regency changed hands repeatedly, gradually affecting people's lives. Southern regions began frequently erupting in rebellion, with Upper Egypt nearly falling into anarchy, an administrative breakdown. When external troubles multiply, internal chaos naturally follows. Besides domestic turmoil, external pressures equally shook Ptolemaic dynasty rule. The Seleucid Empire, another successor to the Macedonian Empire, fought 6 Syrian wars with Egypt from 274 to 168 BCE for Mediterranean and Aegean supremacy, a long struggle for regional dominance. During Ptolemy V's reign, the Fifth Syrian War erupted. Seleucid king Antiochus III reached agreement with Macedonian Philip V, actively seeking to profit from chaos by planning Syrian invasion and dividing Ptolemaic overseas territories. A coordinated attack. Subsequently, both sides clashed at Mount Panion in the northern Golan Heights in 198 BCE. The Battle of Panion, opening the Hellenistic Empire's Pandora's box. First, the Ptolemaic side suffered devastating losses with 20,000 battle deaths and over half the army destroyed. Subsequently, losing Palestinian territory cost the Ptolemaic dynasty control over Aegean trade and access to their most reliable mercenary sources, creating economic and military crises that plunged the dynasty into endless decline and chaos. A decisive defeat with long-term consequences. Though the Seleucid Empire achieved military victory, occupying all of Palestine, it also became overconfident, misjudging the situation and beginning inappropriate rapid expansion, ultimately being taught harsh lessons by Rome and suffering domestic decline. A victory that contained the seeds of future defeat. After Ptolemy V's death, Ptolemy VI ascended, continuing like his predecessor to engage in endless struggles with the Seleucid Empire over territory. Though the Seleucid Empire was also in decline, following the principle that the weak prey on the weaker. In the Sixth Syrian War, erupting in 170 BCE, the Ptolemaic dynasty was again defeated, with even capital, Alexandria, briefly occupied by the Seleucid Empire. A humiliating invasion. Helpless Ptolemy VI was forced to seek Roman aid. Under Roman intervention, the Seleucid Empire was compelled to withdraw from Egypt. A fateful invitation that would eventually lead to Roman domination. However, foreign forces' withdrawal gave domestic factions a stage for competition. Subsequently, Ptolemaic dynasty politics resembled a wrestling match, with various forces taking turns. You overthrow me, I overthrow you, making upheaval the norm. A chaotic endgame. In 51 BCE, the famous Cleopatra VII ascended the throne. Reportedly intelligent, beautiful, and politically astute, her life was highly dramatic, particularly her involvement in late Roman Republic politics and close relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, spawning various legends that made her famous in literature and art. A historical figure who became a legend. In literary and film portrayals, she seduced Julius Caesar and his subordinate Antony to prevent Egypt's absorption by the Roman Empire, winning 22 years of peace for Egypt. Therefore, she's commonly called the Queen of Egypt and regarded by Egyptians as a hero, a nationalist icon. Regarding the Queen of Egypt, two mysteries remain unsolved. One concerns her true appearance. People still haven't found her remains, so her appearance can't be reconstructed. Based on excavated ancient Roman coins, the depicted Queen of Egypt had masculine features, not only not beautiful, but somewhat ugly, a contrast with her legendary beauty. Another mystery concerns her death. The most widely circulated theory is poisoning by asp. In 30 BCE, Octavian attacked Egypt. Antony, seeing the situation was hopeless, committed suicide by sword. Subsequently, the Queen of Egypt was captured by Octavian. She reportedly tried everything to escape and seduce Octavian, but failed. When she learned she would be taken to Rome for a triumph parade, she fell into despair and desperation. She ordered servants to bring a poisonous snake called an asp, ultimately dying from its bite while unconscious. A dramatic end that has captured imaginations for millennia. However, experts believe the asp theory contains too many contradictions and errors, making it untenable. Others suggest she was simply killed by Octavian, a less romantic but more plausible explanation. Regardless of the cause of death, it couldn't change one outcome. Egypt was incorporated into Rome, becoming a province of the Roman Empire. From this point, ancient Egypt as a nation formally ended, the end of 3 millennia of pharaonic rule. The Egyptian province under Roman rule lasted nearly 700 years. Roman emperors replaced pharaohs and gods, occupying the highest position of worship, a religious transformation that reflected political change. During this period, ancient Egyptian burial rituals changed significantly. Originally highly stylized Egyptian art became highly realistic under Mediterranean cultural influence during this period, reflecting Roman period Egyptian culture's diversity, an artistic evolution. Most significantly affected was an important component of ancient Egyptian civilization: Egyptian religious belief. History seems circular. During Akhenaten's time, Egypt saw the world's first monotheism, progressively influencing later monotheistic religions' birth. Now, having come full circle, it returned, a theological irony. Around the 1st century CE, Christianity entered Egypt. Egyptian mythology contributed to Christianity's development in various ways. For example, the cross derived from Egypt's Ankh symbol of life. The Virgin and Child story originated from Isis and Horus, and both had aspirations for the afterlife, a cultural continuity beneath religious change. This familiar religious format led Egyptians to join Christianity en masse, showing rejection of Roman rulers who prohibited polytheism, a political choice as much as a religious one. Growing Christian populations also faced Roman suppression, leading to multiple fierce conflicts during this period. A religious struggle that would transform Egypt. To survive, Egyptians united around churches in heroic struggles. These Christian Egyptians were later called Copts by invading Arabs. Modern Copts are basically direct descendants of ancient Egyptians, a living link to the pharaonic past. During this period, Copts created Coptic language by combining Greek letters with Demotic script. This language is still used in Coptic religious ceremonies today, a linguistic heritage. In 639 CE, Arabs occupied Egypt, beginning Egypt's Arab era. During this period, considerable numbers of Copts converted to Islam, transforming Copts from Egypt's majority to a minority, a demographic and religious shift. Simultaneously, Arabic rapidly replaced Greek, Coptic, and various other ancient languages as Egypt's common tongue. Fewer and fewer people could speak Coptic, and they never again established their own government. A linguistic transformation. From this point, ancient Egypt as a civilizational form had completely ceased. Its cessation is difficult to pinpoint with any specific date. It was more like a process of being buried, Constant foreign invasions were like overwhelming sand, gradually burying its religion, ethnicity, culture, and other ancient civilizational elements in history's dust, a slow fading rather than a sudden end. However, cessation doesn't mean disappearance. True disappearance means no inheritance, no remembrance. On this ancient land, people still continue and tell its story, discussing its historical achievements, marveling at its former greatness, while exploring its unknown secrets. This ancient and mysterious civilization still attracts people like a magnet. It's only regrettable that these few words cannot exhaust its vast historical changes, and our brief lives cannot fully witness its true essence, a humility appropriate when facing such a long and rich history.